This is the screencast for the third try it in Lesson 23 of Stephen's C# 24-Hour Trainer. This screencast is going to talk about creating classes that inherit from each other. Note that there's also a bonus screencast for this lesson that talks about slightly more advanced features of inherited classes. So this is the test application I've built for this try it. I've actually put some code behind these buttons so you won't have to watch me type it in advance. But the interesting part of this example is building the three classes. We're going to start with a person class. This is the most primitive of the three classes, the most fundamental. And let's give it some public properties. These don't really do anything fancy, so I'm going to make them auto-implemented properties. And they're all pretty similar, so I'm just going to copy and paste and change their names. So last name, street, city, state, and zip. And I'm also going to give it a public method. I'm going to call it getAddress. It's going to return a string, and it's going to return the properties concatenated in a way that would be appropriate for printing them on an envelope or letterhead or something like that. So I'm simply going to return first name plus last name. We'll start a new line, plus street, another new line, city, we'll add some spaces, state, add some more spaces, and then finally the zip code. All right, so that's our person class. Now let's add an employee class which inherits from that. So to make it inherit from person, we just put a colon out here and then we type the person class. So everything, an employee is now a type of person, so all of the properties and methods that person defines, employee inherits. So it automatically has first name, last name, and so forth. I'm going to add a couple more things here. I'm going to add a public int, which is the employee ID, also auto-implemented, and I'm going to add a public mail stop. So that'll be the office number, building number, or whatever. So once mail gets into a company, the mail stop will help people figure out exactly where it needs to go. We're going to add one more class. This is going to be the manager class. It's going to inherit from employee. So a manager object, because it's the type of employee, will have all of the properties, methods that are defined by employee. Well, employee inherits things from person, so it includes those things, therefore manager also includes them. So manager has a first name, a last name, and so forth. It also has an employee ID and a mail stop. I'm going to add another property here just for the sake of adding it. I'm going to call it department name. Department name. Whoops. There we go. All right, so those are our three classes. Let's go back over to the main form. And when the form loads, it creates some objects of these different classes. It creates a person object named Dan, employee objects Alice and Bob, and a manager named Cindy. So they're defined out here at the field level, and then in the form's load event handler, it creates them. There's Alice, a new employee, and it fills in Alice's various properties. So that's not very interesting. It's a lot of typing. That's why I'm not inflicting it on you. If we click on these buttons, the Alice address, it calls show address, the show address method passing in the person Alice. Alice is actually an employee. Here's the show address method. It takes as a parameter a person, and it simply calls the getAddress method to display that person's address in a message box. Now Alice is an employee. If we go back up here, we can see that. There's Alice declared as an employee. Cindy is declared as a manager. Even though Alice is an employee, not just a plain old ordinary person, this show address method can take Alice as a parameter, because while Alice is an employee, all employees are persons. So no matter which of these objects we pass into the show address method, it will still work. So let's run this program and see what happens after we fix the bug. Oh yeah, I had a direct reports property earlier that I'm not going to use for this example, so I'll just comment that out. All right, so here's our code. Alice gets passed in, and it displays Alice's address. So even though Alice is an employee, this routine, this method, can treat Alice as a person. Similarly, Bob, Cindy, and Dan. No matter what class they are, because they're all derived from person, they can all be treated as persons. So that's it for this example. I encourage you to take a look at the bonus screencast because it provides a little more detail for this example and shows you a slightly more advanced feature, which is kind of interesting.